Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Bond Vigilantes TV. Today we'll be doing a special edition on a topic that has been widely debated by many investors globally. Essentially, who will be the next Fed chair head at the Federal Reserve. And for this, I'm joined today by Jim Leaviss. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Pierre.
Thanks for being here. So, Jim, Janet Yellen's mandate only ends end of January, but typically whoever Trump appoints needs to be certified by the Senate, and that may take a bit of time. So historically, in October, the new Fed chair has been appointed. So people are expecting a decision very soon. We'll go over the candidates this morning, but let's start off with Janet Yellen, who is a candidate for her own succession. What do you think of her? Does she stand a chance, given her relatively tumultuous relationship with Trump in the past?
Well, I think she does stand a chance, but the question is, would she want the job anyway? And she knows that if she does do another term at the Fed, she will be the fall guy if something goes wrong. So I think that she is dovish, and Trump is certainly someone who would like a dovish chair in the Fed, but she's also somebody who he's criticised in the past, somebody who is really a democratic appointee, and I think as a result of both of those things, she probably will not accept it, even if it was offered, and I think it's unlikely that she will be offered it this time round. Okay.
Let's look now at the other two favorite candidates, which are essentially Kevin Warsh and Jerome Powell. Do you have a view on which one would be the most disruptive, maybe, for the Fed? Or
Well, the favourite is Kevin Warsh. Powell has come up from nowhere, really, over the past few weeks. You know, if you went back maybe a month or so, Janet Yellen was still one of the favourites, and she certainly dropped down the betting order. Powell has come up out of nowhere. The most interesting thing I can find out about him really is he's uncontroversial. He is a Republican though, and I think that that plays well to Trump's base. Warsh is the more interesting one. He's the favourite now. He's much more hawkish, and I think that if it wasn't for the fact that he's married to the daughter of one of Trump's best mates, that would probably put him out of the running. He's certainly been very critical about the Fed's inflation-fighting credibility, and he's been also critical about quantitative easing. You know, he opposed the rounds that came after the very first round of QE after the great financial crisis, and he's also talked a lot more about unwinding of the balance sheet sooner rather than later. And I kind of find those two things incompatible with Trump's pro-growth, run the economy hot stance. So it still seems like he will be in the driving seat for the nomination, but it doesn't seem right in terms of how it fits with Trump's worldview.
Yes, especially with his plans maybe for tax reform in the U.S., you would expect him to want someone relatively dovish, right, at the Fed?
Yeah, what does Trump want? I've never heard him talk about inflation or deflation or inflation targeting regimes, but he talks about growth, and he talks about wanting 3% growth, and he talks about jobs. And those two things, jobs and growth, are what he's focused on. So I think that he wants to run the US economy super hot, and he's not really been able to do that through the other reforms. He's not getting fiscal reform through as quickly as he wanted. And so what's left? And what's left is putting a super dove, run the economy steaming hot into the Fed. And I don't think Kevin Warsh probably is that person.
With the Vice Chair, Stanley Fischer, having resigned for personal reasons a couple months ago, there are now essentially 4 vacancies on the Board of Governors. So in theory, that would really enable Trump to put his mark and his stamp on the Board of Governors. Is that something that he's going to be trying to do, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, we've got another 3 vacancies come up now at the Fed, now that Stan Fischer has gone, and it's a great opportunity for him to redesign it. Remember, Trump's base has been calling for an audit of the Fed and an end to the kind of pretend money that we have, as they would see it, in terms of quantitative easing. So this is a real opportunity for him to move it away from an academic-based, economics-focused, inflation-fighting Fed that we've had under both Bernanke and Yellen, and move it to something, stuff it full of businessmen who want easy money, cheap money, and want growth at all costs, and They don't want reform of of banking sector in the wrong direction. They want banks to be free to do what they used to do in the good old days.
Yeah, So that is very interesting, and ultimately, investors like to talk about who will be the next Fed chair, but ultimately, it's only one vote out of 15 or 17.
It is more important than that, though, isn't it?
Yeah, because he influences the other members. But ultimately, can the Fed really, whoever gets appointed, deviate from its path of gradual interest rate hikes and being data dependent, especially as there's no real inflationary pressures around right now?
Well, you say that. There are some early signs. I mean, over the last month, we've seen the kind of prices paid inflation indicators in both service sector and manufacturing show some real surprising upside. So I think there is an argument that perhaps we're seeing some early signs of inflation coming through. But you're right, we're not at the inflation target of 2% yet, and we may not really get there for some time on a sustained basis. So the Fed has an excuse to do nothing, and if Trump does put a new person in charge, then it does give them an excuse to keep rates on hold for the foreseeable future. And the market, as you know, is pricing in rate hikes for not just one for the end of the year, but some next year as well. And if we don't get that inflation pressure, then a Trump appointee does have an excuse to keep rates on hold, and that would obviously be very bullish for probably for stock markets, certainly for government bonds, but not good news for the US dollar.
Thank you, Jim, for your views on the Fed. In terms of what to watch out for this week, we'll have the fifth round of the Brexit negotiations that are kicking off between the UK and Europe today. On Monday and Tuesday as well, we have a variety of European countries publishing their industrial production numbers. On Wednesday, we'll have the all-important FOMC minutes. And finally, on Friday, the inflation numbers in the US for September. Thank you for watching all, and have a great week.